Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
In his 74-page manifesto, the shooter wrote this. I want to put it on the screen. Are you a supporter of Donald Trump as a symbol of renewed white identity and common purpose? Sure. What does the president think of that?
Yeah, in fact, I'm a little disappointed you didn't put up the next sentence, which the next sentence, because I looked at it last night, was, what about for his policies and as a leader? And he said, dear God, no. I don't think it's fair to cast this person as a supporter of Donald Trump any more than it is to look at his sort of his eco-terrorist passages in that manifesto and align him with Nancy Pelosi or Ms. Ocasio-Cortez. This was a disturbed individual, an evil person, and to sit to try and tie him to an American politician of either party probably ignores some of the deeper difficulties that this sort of activity exposes.
I want to make it clear. I take your point, and I want to make it clear. The only person responsible for this slaughter is the shooter, not President Trump. But some critics have said that he has contributed over the years to an anti-Muslim climate. Here is one of his statements from the campaign.
I think Islam hates us. There's something there that there's a tremendous hatred.
And after the attack, Democratic Senator Kirsten Gillibrand tweeted this: time and again, this president has embraced and emboldened white supremacists, and instead of condemning racist terrorists, he covers for them. And some folks were disturbed that after we saw the manifesto, after the shooting, which said that he was doing this to kill, quote, invaders, the president said this when he was signing his veto message.
People hate the word invasion, but that's what it is. It's an invasion of drugs and criminals and people.
I understand, and I very much agree that the president is not responsible for this action. But has he considered, given the fact that some people seem to feel that he has given them cover, has he considered giving a major speech condemning anti-Muslim, white supremacist bigotry?
You've asked a couple of questions, so let's go back and talk about what Senator Gillibrand said. Look, there's folks who just don't like the president, and everything that goes wrong, they're going to look for a way to tie that to the president. So they see the word invaders in the manifesto, they see that passage, and they say, oh my goodness, there must be some connection between this. That's just absurd to say that there's some type of connection between being against illegal immigration, which is what the veto was about, for legal immigration, and the ruthless live streaming of murder of 15 people. The two things have nothing to do with each other. So I recognize the fact.
Let's forget all of that. To the degree that there is an issue, let me just ask, to the degree that there is an issue with white supremacists, white nationalists, anti-Muslim bigotry in this country, and there is an issue with that, why not deliver a speech condemning it?
You've seen the president stand up for religious liberties, individual liberties. The president is not a white supremacist. I'm not sure how many times we have to say that. And to simply ask the question every time something like this happens overseas, or even domestically, to say, oh my goodness, it must somehow be the president's fault, speaks to a politicization of everything that I think is undermining sort of the institutions that we have in the country today. Let's take what happened in New Zealand yesterday for what it is: a terrible, evil, tragic act. and figure out why those things are becoming more prevalent in the world. Is it Donald Trump? Absolutely not. Is there something else happening in our culture where people think, you know what, I think today I'm going to go on TV and live stream me murdering other people? That's what we should be talking about, not the politics of the United States.
If I may, all I'm saying is the president speaks out about a lot of things that he's not responsible for, and he doesn't feel that there's any link. Terrorism. Why not make a speech and make it clear that there is no place in America for this kind of hatred?
Well, I think you saw that yesterday in the tweet. I mean, the president, not sure what more you want the president to do. You may say you want to give him a national speech to address the nation. That's fine. Maybe we do that, maybe we don't. But I think you get down to the basic issue is that the president is doing everything that we can to prevent this type of thing from happening here. The president is doing everything that we can to make it clear, look, this has to stop. The work that we do, including, as I mentioned at the outset, with our Kiwi friends, to prevent this happening is the very central part of defending this nation, which is how the president spends a great deal of his time. So, look, it's a tragedy, and I get that. And we're in a hyper-partisan sort of time in the country, and I get that. But that doesn't mean we need to marry these two events.
It is Monday, the 18th of March of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is River City Hash Mondays. You know, we had Mueller Fridays. Looks like we got Mueller Mondays now, too, folks. Oh, my God. Broidy's offices were raided. There's news that MBS, his power has been diminished somewhat. We'll see about that. All of this is connected. I mean, MBS loses some power isn't good news for Jared. That's right. We don't know what's going to go on in that front, but I have a feeling. There was a question on why Trump was so agitated over the weekend. It's just tweet after tweet, just crazy stuff too, more crazy than usual. And the speculation is that the S is going to hit the fan this week. Well, it started today. Mueller Mondays. We got Mueller Mondays now. Oh, boy. It's going to be going all the way around every 7 days now, I am sure. Well, looks like we've had another shooting, a mass shooting this time in Utrecht. And news is still coming out about that. That could be, quote, a terrorist attack. Usually when I hear terrorist attack, they mean Muslims. Or doing the attacking. Otherwise, it's like an angelic boy who turned and grew into evil. Yeah, he was angelic, the guy there in New Zealand. That's how he's described. Not even a terrorist. Well, at least here in America. And, speaking of which, acting White House Chief of Staff, because he's just acting. He acts in a lot of different positions, that Mick Mulvaney. Well, he wasn't adequately able to answer whether white supremacist Donald Trump is a white supremacist. Oh, I know. Mick said, of course he's not a white supremacist. Everyone knows that. Which means that he didn't answer the question because pretty much everyone knows he's a white supremacist. That's why white supremacists love him so much all around the world. All right. Well, the reason Mick isn't able to adequately answer the question is because, I got to tell you, I think Mick's pretty much a white supremacist too, and you can tell by his policies. I love the non-answer when this manifesto. Now, you got to take the manifesto with a grain of salt. Okay, I mean, there's a lot of triggering in there. We want to be sure. But I loved how Mick pointed out that, after the attacker had mentioned Trump as, being the white savior of the world, then the next line said, but, as a leader in his policies, as if that's supposed to negate the fact that Trump is still a white supremacist. What the guy's saying is that, we wanted a white supremacist with some competence. All right? I mean, Trump is a great symbol, but he's just so incompetent. Yep. Pretty much everybody wants a white supremacist fascist to make the trains run on time, and then it will be okay for a while. And it doesn't look like things are going to fare too well for this guy because he can't make the trains run on time. He's incompetent. And pretty soon, the powers that really want a fascist government are going to get fed up. What can we do about it? I would say that we're going to be voting, aren't we? And we're going to make sure that we vote in such massive numbers that a bunch of ill-educated Russian FSB officers, ill-educated on American civics, they think they know. But they don't. That's why they got so much help from the GOP. The GOP are the masters of obstructing using protocol. They made it their life's mission, especially with the black president, which reminds me of Chuck Todd. Chuck Todd is blaming Obama for everything. Why couldn't Obama bring the country together? You mean because, like, maybe there were armed Tea Party fascists on the lawn of the National Mall? I mean, could that have something to do with it? The calls for lynching the Kenyan socialist in the Oval Office? Yeah, why couldn't he bring the country together? Why couldn't he just convince all of those GOP senators and Congress people to just get along? He gave them everything they wanted, and they still kicked him in the teeth. Why couldn't he have convinced them? When you've seen both sides of Chuck Todd, you will notice that you've been looking at the same asshole the whole time. I'll be here all week. Oh, do try the veal. Speaking of which, we had a proper Irish dinner yesterday, and it was fun. Yeah, St. Patrick's Day, and did a proper corned beef dinner, and it was pretty good. Had my brother over, and he had to fly out of town today. He's out in Atlanta doing some filming, because that's what he does now. He's in front of the camera. And so we're taking care of his... it's a particular kind of bulldog type dog. Really, I like him. He's really fun. Named Gunner. And he has brindle coloring, which is fairly rare. So we better take care of him so he doesn't get stolen. I'm sure that there are dog nappers everywhere you go. But so we're taking care of Gunner this week. And he's a good old guy. Snores a lot, but that's what bulldogs and boxer types do. They snore. But he's a fun little guy. So, yeah, we had a great dinner, my brother and my mom and I. And good visit. And so that was good. All right. Let's get out of this personal business and back into the matters at hand. It's Mueller Mondays now on River City Hash Mondays. Jeez. We had to have drinks on Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. That's why I made a Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we had to have a French 77 to really gird our loins because of what we're going to hear in Mueller Fridays. But now we got Mueller Mondays. It's too early in the week to drink that copious amounts. There's work to be done for the rest of the week, my gosh. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Iowa Republicans push a bill to restrict public student voting rights, because of course they do. You don't really live here. You can't vote here. Really? I'm paying taxes, buddy. The University of Tennessee will be free for low-income students starting in the fall of 2020. Let's hope they're able to vote. And the Supreme Court confronts a prosecutor who didn't know how to quit being racist. Wow, the Roberts Court? I thought racism was over in this country. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Israel's top court disqualified a far-rightist candidate and approved a disputed Arab party for next month's national election. Wow, will Bibi be in jail by that time? I'm not sure. And the Australian Prime Minister said far-right Senator Fraser Anning should be charged for punching 17-year-old egg boy William Connolly. I got to tell you, that kid, he knows how to slip a punch. He was pretty good. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the rightish of the page is the chat room link monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Do engage there. To the leftish of the page from the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is our contribute button. And do please become a recurring Patreon to Netroots Radio. Your generosity keeps our bills, helps us keep our bills paid tremendously. Thank you. If you could afford a cup of coffee a month and send those funds our way, we make those dollars stretch. Oh my gosh, we do. And bills are increasing, and the cost of running everything increases. Don't you know? Everybody does. So thank you once again for your generosity. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can at Netroots Radio. Thank you, Tom, for taking care of that. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime, and then I get the links on social media out around that time too, as soon as it gets posted. And you can follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. Pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iTunes, YouTube, iHeart, and wherever fine podcasts can be found. Okay, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is Out of Think Progress by Lindsay Gibbs. Iowa is regularly at the center of our national political conversation thanks to the biennial Iowa caucuses, which mark the beginning of both the Republican and Democratic presidential primaries. Now, with Senate File 575, Iowa is once again making headlines, this time for its attempts at voter suppression. It has been working for the Republicans pretty damn well for a while, but now they're exposed, aren't they? Mm-hmm. Under SF 575, which passed out of a committee earlier this month, students at Iowa's public universities, the University of Iowa, Iowa State U, and the University of Northern Iowa would be unable to vote early on campus. This is because of a provision introduced in the bill that would prevent satellite voting locations from being set up in a state-owned building. Yeah, don't have voting in a state-owned building. That would be socialism. This would not impact students attending private universities in Iowa, of course. Jeez. Additionally, this bill would require the approximately 70,000 students at Iowa's public universities to fill out a form when they graduate, indicating if they plan to stay in Iowa or move out of state. If they indicate that they plan on moving, the state will automatically purge them from the voting rolls. If their plans change and they remain in Iowa, they would have to start the voter registration process over again from scratch. As we're encouraging kids to stay in Iowa, we should be making it as easy as possible to be Iowans, to participate in our elections, not making any barriers for them. And that was Jamie Fitzgerald, a Polk County auditor. He continued, "It's perplexing, is it?" Of course, the bill makes perfect sense when you recognize that it has been moving through the Iowa Senate firmly on party lines. Voters between the ages of 18 and 29 turned out in record numbers for the 2018 midterms. And then they voted for Democrats by a margin of 35 points. And you know that the Republican bear, why are they now the Republican bear? Because they're Putin's allies. They're toadies. And I don't know, the bear just has a nice flair to it, I think. Why would they want to be disrupting elections when the Democrats have been faring so well? Because Putin has some other plans for this country. Well, it doesn't. Now, this bill doesn't just target college students. It will make it harder for all Iowans to vote by closing the polls an hour earlier on Election Day, requiring a county auditor to verify signatures, prohibiting a county auditor from using the voter registration system to verify absentee ballot requests, and changing the deadlines to submit early ballots. And it's important to note that the ban on using state-owned buildings as satellite voting sites would also impact the Iowa Veterans Home. Because the Iowa state government is controlled by Republicans, the bill has a good chance of passing, but the editorial board of the Des Moines Register has come out strongly against the bill. The state does not have a problem with voter fraud. It is very close to non-existent, yet Republicans cite fraud to justify bills like this one. What they're attempting to do is disgraceful. Now, the reason that they always call it fraud when the Democrats turn out such large numbers and prevail in the elections, because in the Republicans' mind, there must be something criminal if people aren't voting for them. This next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays is a heartening story, also out of Think Progress, this time by Sam Fullwood III. Joining a small but growing list of U.S. colleges and universities seeking to make higher education more accessible to a greater number of qualified students, the University of Tennessee announced recently it would guarantee free tuition and fees to admitted in-state residents with a family household income of less than $50,000. The novel program, called UT Promise, provides a financial aid package for in-state students who enroll at one of the system's campuses in Knoxville, Chattanooga, or Martin. The UT Promise covers the cost of attending classes at the selected campuses after all other financial aid, such as Pell Grants and Hope scholarships, are received. Interim University President Randy Boyd unveiled the novel program Thursday during the university's annual State of University Tennessee address in Nashville, noting the program will begin with the incoming class in the fall of 2020 and seeks to eliminate cost as a barrier for students to obtain an undergraduate degree. Students already enrolled will be eligible to apply for the program. This isn't a school just for the wealthy or elite. We're getting lots of money from them. If they would just stop bribing the badminton coach and give it to the admissions office, everybody would be happier now, wouldn't they? In this reporter's opinion, Boyd continued in his speech. This is a school for everyone. It is critically important that we take a lead role in ensuring students can achieve their dream of obtaining an undergraduate college degree. It's sort of like when there's gentrification in a neighborhood and a developer is putting in like a development of condos, and they promise, oh yeah, well, on the ground floor we'll make that available for low-income residents and we'll keep the cost capped. And that's how they get the project to go through the whole planning and zoning review and then ultimately okayed by the city council. And then when it gets down to it, you find out that, oh, yeah, well, you know, people can't really enter their domicile where people can see them. And, yeah, we're not having these units at market rate. I don't know. It smacks of a little bit of that white savior stuff again here. But let me just say, this should be the idea of offering, you know, after all scholarships and grants have been used up, when all those avenues have been taken care of, there should be another backstop. And that is this program that University of Tennessee and other universities and colleges across the country are implementing. I mean, after all, it's only fair. Final offering here on the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is by Ian Millhiser, also of Think Progress. If a man's life were not at stake in Flowers v. Mississippi, the facts of this case would read like a Monty Python sketch. District Attorney Doug Evans prosecuted Curtis Flowers 6 times for allegedly murdering 4 people at a furniture store where Flowers used to be employed. At the first trial in 1997, Flowers was convicted of one of these murders. The Mississippi Supreme Court threw that conviction out due to prosecutorial misconduct. Then, in 1999, Evans convinced a second jury to convict Flowers, who just happens to be black, by the way, of one of the murders. But that conviction was also thrown out because Evans engaged in the exact same kind of prosecutorial misconduct that tainted the first trial. Notably, the jury pool for Flowers' second trial included 5 African Americans, and the prosecution attempted to remove all 5 of these black potential jurors. The trial judge ultimately concluded that one of those jurors was improperly removed, so the trial proceeded with a single African American on the jury. At Flowers' third trial in 2004, Evans could exercise 15 preemptory strikes. That is, he had the power to remove up to 15 individuals from the jury pool. He used all 15 to remove all the African Americans. Though Flowers was also convicted by this whitewashed jury, the Mississippi Supreme Court also threw that conviction out, holding that the state engaged in racially discriminatory practices during the jury selection process and that the trial court committed reversible error in upholding the preemptory strikes of the 2 black potential jurors. At Flowers' fourth trial, Evans used 11 preemptory strikes, all of them against African Americans. The case ended in a mistrial, however, after the jury was unable to reach a unanimous verdict, and the 5th trial also ended in a mistrial. Jeez, how many bites of how big is this apple? Evans' behavior in the 6th trial is now before the Supreme Court. In a case that will be argued next Wednesday, that's this coming Wednesday, by the way. Now, in that trial, Evans allowed a single black juror to be seated before striking 5 more African Americans. A jury of 11 white people and 1 black person convicted Flowers in the 6th trial and then sentenced him to die. Just go away. Now, the issue in Flowers is whether Evans again violated the Constitution by excluding jurors because of their race. Under the Supreme Court's decision in Baston v. Kentucky, judges must use a 3-step process to determine whether a particular juror was removed because of their race. Once a criminal defendant raises a colorable claim that the juror was struck because of race, the prosecutor must offer a race-neutral explanation for the decision to exclude the potential juror. The judge must then decide whether they believe that reason. We weren't getting him off the jury because they're black, but look at the way that his pants sag. You can see his butt crack. We don't want that here. Sounds pretty racist to me. Now, in practice, Batson, with its highly subjective inquiry into a prosecutor's motives, has not been much of a shield against racial jury discrimination, really now. Prosecutors typically aren't fools. They can almost always come up with a plausible reason why they wanted to remove a particular individual from the jury, and Flowers is no exception. In its brief defending Evans' conduct at the 6th trial, the state claims that one of the excluded jurors was sued by the furniture store owned by one of the victims. Another excluded juror, they claim, worked with Flowers' sister on the same assembly line. A third allegedly had children who were friends with Flowers. Flowers' attorneys, for their part, claim that many of the state's claims about these jurors are erroneous or even outright fabrications. You mean the prosecution lied about whether family knew family? Interesting, isn't it? Well, this is Mississippi. But the state's claimed reasons for excluding these jurors are at least facially legitimate. Nevertheless, there are still very good reasons, and 2 very good reasons, to doubt Evans' sincerity, even setting aside the factual disputes about individual jurors' relationships with Flowers. The first is that Evans has a long history of engaging in racist jury selection, specifically in trials where Curtis Flowers is the defendant. Twice, Mississippi courts invalidated his use of the preemptory strikes. According to Flowers' attorneys, across the 5 trials for which the numbers are available, Evans faced a total of 43 black prospective jurors, and he struck 41 of them and allowed only 1, the single black juror who sat on Flowers' 6th jury. Well, that goes to show that he's not racist. He let a black person on the jury eventually. Now, the second reason is that Evans eventually came up with a legitimate-sounding reason to remove black jurors in the 6th trial. He did so after subjecting those potential jurors to unusually rigorous questioning. Flowers' lawyers claim that Evans asked the 5 excluded black jurors a total of 145 questions, an average of 29 each. Meanwhile, Evans asked the 11 whites seated on the panel a total of 12 questions. And that works out to about an average of 1.1 questions per juror. So I think that, like, one juror got 2 questions. That's the way I look at it. Meanwhile, while Evans' questions did eventually uncover some ties between Flowers and some of the black jurors, the case also took place in a very small community where everybody knows everybody. They're all on the same party line. Oh, you don't know what a party line is? Now, let's be clear here. The whole county, Montgomery County, where the 6th trial took place, only has a population of just a tick over 10,000 people. It's likely that many of the white potential jurors also had connections to Flowers or the murder victims, though Evans did not appear interested in going to similar lengths to probe those ties. Of course not. Now, ultimately, however, it's not a solution for the Supreme Court to cherry-pick a case like Flowers every few years in order to correct a particularly egregious wrong. And so there's a systemic problem of judges allowing prosecutors to engage in racial jury discrimination, and Batson has not worked. And so the most important question is not likely to be whether Flowers prevails. He most likely will. The most important question is whether a court, led by a man of surpassing racial naivete, is willing to treat racial jury selection as a systemic problem requiring more than just an occasional one-off correction. Such an outcome is unlikely from a Chief Justice who once concluded that America does not need to fully operate or have a fully operational Voting Rights Act because we are no longer racist enough to justify such a law. The Supreme Court will likely continue to strike back against truly eye-popping examples of racism, but they are just as likely to remain blind to more sophisticated racists who discriminate with more subtlety than District Attorney Evans. Indeed. All right, let's get to our break. And when we come back from that break, we're going to go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, A Homecoming. When a new film from two-time Oscar winner Asghar Farhadi comes around, all eyes are going to be upon it. And so it is with Everybody Knows. The setup is a wedding which has relatives near and far returning home to a small town in Spain. One of the latter, Laura, has come from Argentina, Saul's husband, at least for the start, and with her two kids. It's Laura's sister who's being wed. A character from nearby is Paco, who runs a vineyard near town. It takes a while to achieve clarity as to all the relationships, but we soon find out that Paco and Laura, Javier Bardem and Penelope Cruz, the central characters, have a past. As Farhadi paints this sumptuous celebratory scene, and taking clues from his other films, we know that something is about to happen, and we come to suspect that it will involve Laura's wild teenage daughter, Irena. That something is that she is kidnapped, with instructions following closely on not to call police. It's on the path to resolution where this picture shines, as old relationships, including financial arrangements and old resentments and secrets, one of which you might see coming, intertwine to strongly suggest an inside job. What we have here is storytelling through character development, focusing especially on the character's past. Before the kidnapping, when Irena and her just-found boyfriend ascend a medieval clock tower filled with beautifully captured ancient machinery, we see dates and initials carved into the wall. It's only later that we realize that this is where the stage is really being set. The conclusion here is not tragic, neither is it fulfilling. Various characters mouth the words of the title Everybody Knows throughout. Were the film less nuanced and well-acted, a case could be made that the title contained a spoiler. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at Take2MovieReview.com and feed us back at our page on YouTube.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1970. This was the day postal workers walked off the job in New York City. The strike caught many by surprise. The workers had not received a raise since 1967 and were not permitted by law to engage in collective bargaining. The postal workers were offered a 4% raise, but declined the offer, noting that Congress had voted to raise its own wages by 41%. Frustrated, the National Association of Letter Carriers Local 36 voted to strike. At the time, a staggering 35 million pieces of mail went through New York City each day. The strike ground the mail to a halt. The lack of correspondence impacted Wall Street. The stock market fell due to the lack of correspondence, and some feared Wall Street would be forced to close during the strike. President Nixon took to the airwaves to condemn the strike as illegal. He ordered the strikers to return to work. They did not comply. Instead, the strike grew to include nearly 200,000 workers in 30 major cities, even as postal union leaders urged the workers to return to the job. The rank-and-file members stayed firm. After the strike had lasted a week, President Nixon again addressed the nation in a televised broadcast. He announced the commencement of Operation Graphic Hand, ordering 25,000 members of the United States Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, and National Guard to deliver the mail in New York. This only served to anger the striking workers even further. The inexperienced National Guardsmen who had no training in how to deliver the mail were not able to get the Postal Service moving. Finally, the government began to negotiate. The postal workers won an 8% increase in wages and proved their power as a united labor force.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
I'm Mark Boulanger. Trade union leaders from all over the world are attending a conference of the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women being held in New York. The theme of this year's conference is the role public services play in the struggle to create equality for women. One of the labor leaders attending the conference is Rosa Pavanelli. Ms. Pavanelli is the General Secretary of Public Services International. The PSI is the organization which represents public employee unions around the world. I asked Ms. Pavanelli why public services are so important in the efforts to produce equality for women.
When we talk about women, they amplify the potential for women to access the labor market and to reduce inequality. We live all in a patriarchal system that has been also emphasized by the globalization, despite all the discourse about women. More and more, we see that right-wing governments are reducing public services, and at the same time, they're trying to introduce legislation attacking women's rights. Whether we talk about health, education, healthcare services, social care services, child care services, we talk about what women do every day in their life, taking care of family, taking care of all those around them, their communities, the children, the parents. And without public services, the burden of all this care work is on women's shoulders. This is why we think that public services are essential to women. We need also to consider that public services are very important to preserve natural resources, whether we talk about water or when we talk about renewable energy. In developing countries are still forced to spend great part of their lives wandering around looking for water to provide their family of water or wood and other material to heat and prepare their meals. And when we talk about girls, the future generation, we need to be clear. They need public services for their education. The private has shown to fail in that direction, has shown that everywhere they tried to impose, even in developing countries, a model which is based on the private system, well, family cannot afford to send their children to school. And if they have to choose among women and men, a girl or a boy, they obviously choose a boy because that's the culture we continue to live in. That's why we need public services to ensure that women can have equality. We need to be clear, public services have been provided by public authorities, have been provided by government. They are a responsibility of governments. And the more we propose policies that have this gender approach, what we say gender responsive public services, the more we can contribute to reduce inequality and to enhance the role of women in the society.
Why is the UN Conference on the Commission on the Status of Women important for labor leaders to attend?
Well, this is a forum that happens every year, and it's trying every year to address specific arguments that is related to the social, economical, and political conditions that are undermining the possibility for women to reach equality.
The Conference on the Status of Women is being held at the United Nations headquarters in New York from March 11th to 22nd, 2019. And that's it. International labor news you can use. I'm Mark Boulanger. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
From New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 Minutes. As the world continues to mourn those killed in a mass shooting at 2 mosques in the New Zealand city of Christchurch on Friday, leaving 49 people dead, focus is now shifting to the role social media networks may have played in helping radicalize the man behind Friday's attacks and steps that services like YouTube can take to prevent violent content from reaching the platform in the first place. In addition to obtaining guns, stockpiling ammunition, and plotting the right time to attack the mosques during Friday prayer, the Christchurch shooter appeared to take steps to make sure his mass shooting went viral. He reportedly broadcast his intentions to carry out the attack over Twitter and the online message board 8chan, and then donned a camera to transmit video of the shooting on Facebook Live. Facebook was quick to remove the shooter's video and profile, but video of the attack remained available for hours on YouTube throughout Friday, giving those so inclined plenty of time to download it and ensure the video lives on. Sites like YouTube claim they've eliminated the vast majority of terrorist content in recent years, but Friday's attack reveals the difficulties of weeding out violent content in live streams, a line of business those social media platforms have invested in heavily in recent years. And China's legislature passed a bill Friday ordering government officials to stop using administrative methods to force foreign companies into handing over their technology, a practice the U.S. hopes to address in ongoing trade talks. While the law is being pitched as a goodwill gesture to try and end an ongoing trade war, it stops short of ending technology transfer altogether, since state-run Chinese firms in business with foreign companies still remain bound by law into handing over intellectual property in sectors such as automobile manufacturing and pharmaceuticals. The only difference Friday's law might have is prohibiting party officials from threatening to steal that technology via email. Luke Vargas, New York.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 38 degrees Fahrenheit. And we are expected to go to a high of 74, which we were about yesterday. Very nice weekend all in all. Sunny, clear. People are allowed to burn a little bit earlier now in hopes that they won't be burning later on when it got really smoky. So we'll see how that goes. Other than the stinky stuff people were burning, it was really a quite lovely day. And it will be a lovely day as well. Winds will be light and variable. Looks like out of the southeast. And then we'll shift tonight out of the east and increase to 5 to 10 miles per hour, bringing in partly cloudy conditions. And then we'll be mostly cloudy tomorrow with the winds out of the east-southeast at 5 to 10 miles per hour. because that is bringing in a storm into our region, and we're expected to have about a quarter inch of rain on Wednesday, and various amounts more than that or just a tad less for the rest of the week. So that's fine. The gardens still need a lot of water, and so do the deep-rooted conifers, especially the deep-rooted conifers. Pollen is rated at none. Sorry. Yeah, pollen is done. It's rated at none. I have no data on air quality, but the daytime UV index is in the moderate range at 3. I would be putting on sunscreen, and I will. Barometric pressure is rising at 29.83 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is down to 70%. And though that will be increasing later on this afternoon into this evening. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 52 and partly cloudy. Paris is 53 and partly cloudy. Rome is 59 and partly cloudy. Kiev is 63 Kiev is 63 and fair. Kabul is 34 with rain. Hong Kong is 67 and clear. Tokyo is 53 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 68 degrees with rain. San Francisco, California is 52 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And New York is a crisp 38 degrees Fahrenheit, but you're being radiated and warmed by the generous sun that you have all over your region. So enjoy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Dan Williams of Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Israel's top court disqualified a far-right Jewish politician from next month's national election and approved the candidacy of a disputed Arab party, overturning March 6 decisions by the election board, a court statement said yesterday. The Supreme Court rulings were widely expected and unlikely to shake Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's efforts to craft a rightist alliance that might secure him a record fifth term. Will he have that term in jail, or is he going to prevail in that too? But they deepened the vitriol of a campaign in which his camp has cast itself as the victim of judicial overreach and media bias. Oh, fake news has worked so well here, huh? And has in turn been accused by center-left rivals of race-baiting and fear-mongering. Wow, it resonates, doesn't it? Members of Jewish Power, a small faction that is part of an ultra-nationalist list, which last month forged an election alliance with Netanyahu's Likud party, remain eligible to run. But the court found in favor of appellants who argue that Michael Ben-Ari of the Jewish Power Party had displayed anti-Arab racism. That view was backed by Israel's Attorney General, so he's not allowed to run. The Central Elections Committee, a monitoring body made up of delegates of parties in the current parliament, last month approved Ben-Ari's candidacy while disqualifying Ram Balad, a joint party list representing some of Israel's 20% Arab party. Israel, in the past, prosecuted two ballot figures for contacts with Palestinian militants and accused a former party leader of helping Hezbollah during the 2006 Lebanon war. The court voided the ban on Ram Balad, a mix of Islamists and Arab nationalists, which describes itself as a democratic movement. Justice Minister Ayelet Shaked, a fellow rightist in Netanyahu's outgoing coalition, said in a statement that the court's blocking Ben-Ari while declaring terror-backing parties kosher is a crass and misguided interference in the heart of Israeli democracy. Bibi's bid for a re-election has been challenged by a centrist newcomer, former Armed Forces Chief Benny Gantz. Their escalating exchanges of allegations have included corruption, bigotry, forsaking national security, and abetting Israel's foes. The premier's partnership with Jewish Power also drew rare censure from the U.S. pro-Israel lobby and normally staunch Bibi backer AIPAC, which branded the party racist and reprehensible. Ron Balad, which held 8 seats in the last parliament, said the Supreme Court had upheld its fundamental right to represent our electorate, while Bibi and Gantz compete to see who can incite more powerfully against the Arab public.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Danielle McLean of Think Progress brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. The Australian Prime Minister is coming to the defense of the so-called egg boy, who egged a far-right senator after that senator blamed last week's attack on 2 mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand, on Muslim immigration to the country. If those damn Muslims hadn't been here, they wouldn't have been killed now, wouldn't they? Fraser Anning, a senator from Queensland, Australia, punched 17-year-old William Connolly after the teen cracked an egg on his head during a news conference on Saturday. He lunged at Connolly again before some of his supporters pinned the teenager to the ground. Well, actually, they choked the hell out of him, and would have done worse if, cameras hadn't been trained on him and people were saying, stop choking him. I got to say also, the kid was able to slip the second punch and actually was countering before he was tackled. The egg smash response was in response to Anning's statement following the shootings, in which he said, "The real cause of bloodshed on New Zealand streets today is the immigration program which allowed Muslim fanatics to migrate to New Zealand in the first place." Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison condemned Anning's appalling and ugly remarks, which he said have no place in Australia. Morrison added that the full force of the law should be applied to the far-right senator for hitting the teen. I want to absolutely and completely denounce the statements made by Senator Anning on this horrendous terrorist attack with issues of immigration in his attack on Islamic faith specifically, Morrison said. And Anning has not backed away from his comments and has actually doubled down. Of course, that's what they all do. They're white supremacists, and they will double down. They don't think anything is wrong. The police initially did hold the kid, and when they found out who it was and what had happened and what Anning had said, the police let the kid go with no charges. As well they should. All right, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But you know that Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on. We'll meet up tomorrow for Terrytown Chowder Tuesdays, of course. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.